All right, let's unlock some seriously cool ways to get better at English, boost your fluency. We're going deep with an article you sent in, and it kind of throws the whole study, study, study thing out the window.
Interesting.
Yeah. This one's all about just listening.
Mhm.
Podcasts, music, videos, stuff you probably already do, but maybe not for learning English.
It's pretty neat. It's like flipping the script on how we usually think about learning languages. It says like just hearing English can be as good, maybe even better than just hitting the grammar books.
At first, I wasn't so sure, but the article makes a good point about how, like, listening helps you pick up those natural ways of speaking.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
way you just sound more fluent.
Exactly.
Kind of how babies learn, right? They don't,
Yeah.
like, crack open a grammar book.
No, no.
They're just soaking up the sounds all around them.
Right. Think about it. How many times have you struggled to explain like a grammar rule, but you use it perfectly fine when you're talking?
Oh, all the time.
That's because you've heard it so much, not because you memorized it. Listening lets you do that with English too.
Okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So let's dive into this whole podcasts are your portable language lab thing. What makes them so good for people who are, busy?
Well, podcasts are everywhere, right? You can listen anytime on the bus, at the gym, even doing the dishes, and there's a podcast for like everything. News, mysteries, pop culture, you name it.
But how do we even choose? Especially if, you're not super advanced yet.
Great question. The article says start with podcasts made for English learners. Shows like the BBC Learning English podcast or the English We Speak they use, like clear and simple language, and they often focus on specific grammar or vocab.
So it's like a lesson, but not boring like being in a classroom.
Exactly. Engaging and easy to understand, but still teaches you stuff.
Cool.
And if you're more advanced, the article suggests things like TED Talks Daily, which uses like a wider range of vocabulary and tougher topics.
I like those because the speakers are usually really good.
Oh, for sure.
It's not just what they say, it's how they say it, their pace, their tone. It all adds up to sounding confident.
Definitely. And that's something you can learn from by listening carefully. The Daily by the New York Times is another one for advanced learners. Keeps you up to date on stuff and uses like really sophisticated vocabulary.
Okay, so we've got tons of podcast choices, but let's say I've found one I like. How do I make sure I'm actually learning from it? It's so easy to just have it on in the background.
Right, right. It's about active listening, not just letting it play while you do other stuff. Pay attention, like really listen to how they pronounce things, the tone, even how they use pauses to like add meaning.
So no more zoning out while folding laundry.
Got it.
Yeah, any other tips to like maximize that podcast time?
Totally. Repetition, for one. If there's a word or phrase you don't get, rewind it. Listen again, even say it out loud a few times. Really helps it stick.
Oh yeah, I do that sometimes. Hearing it a few times in context, it just like clicks. What about taking notes? Is that still a good idea with podcasts?
Definitely. Writing down new words, phrases, or like the main points, it can be super helpful. Turns passive listening into more of a study session. Those notes become your own personal study guide.
Makes sense. It's easy to think you'll remember, but having it written down really helps. The article also mentions this shadowing technique, which sounds interesting. What is that
Well, the
exactly?
shadowing is basically copying the speaker. You listen closely and try to repeat exactly what they say, match their speed, their pronunciation, even their tone.
Like being their echo.
Yeah, exactly. Might feel a little weird at first, but it's super good for sounding fluent and natural. Think of it like exercise for your voice. You're fine-tuning your accent and getting those tough sounds down.
I'm sold. Yeah, try that.
Okay.
Let's move on to videos. What makes them so valuable, like adding to our listening toolkit?
Videos add, like visuals, right, which can really help you understand what's going on, especially with slang, idioms, and like body language. You're not just hearing the words, you're seeing how they're used.
It's like subtitles for real life.
Yeah.
You're getting those visual clues, faces, gestures that tell you so much. The article recommends specific types of videos for different goals. Yeah.
It does. It says, for example, TED Talks are good for learning formal speech and fancy vocabulary. Great for like structuring arguments, presenting ideas clearly, and using like high-level language for professional stuff.
And then, like, vlogs are perfect for seeing those everyday conversations.
Exactly.
Like a window into how people really talk with all the slang and stuff.
Totally. Vlogs can help you bridge that gap between like textbook English and what you hear on the street. Plus, they often cover all sorts of topics, from travel to food to gaming, so there's something for everyone.
The article also mentions those YouTube channels for learning English, like BBC Learning English and Speak English with Vanessa. What makes those stand out?
These channels are like lessons and explanations, but way more fun and engaging than textbooks. They use visuals, real-life examples, and sometimes even quizzes to make learning stick.
Okay, so we've got tons of video options. Any tips for using them really effectively for language learning?
Subtitles can be a good starting point, especially if you're a beginner. Use English subtitles to help you follow along, and as you get better, try turning them off sometimes.
Like taking off the training wheels.
Exactly. And don't just watch passively, just like podcasts. Engage with it. Pause the video, look up words you don't know, repeat phrases to practice your pronunciation, even try shadowing the speaker. The more active you are, the more you learn.
This is making a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Now, here's where I get really interested. Using music for language learning. I love music, so tell me more.
Music, right. We all love it. But it turns out it can actually be a secret weapon for learning languages. The article goes into like the science of it, how music uses different parts of the brain and makes it easier to remember things.
Oh, for sure. I definitely remember phrases better if they're in a song.
It's because music taps into our emotions and our sense of rhythm. And it's not just about memorizing lyrics. Singing along helps you internalize pronunciation, intonation, and rhythm in a way that feels natural and fun.
Like a workout for your mouth and your brain at the same time.
Exactly. And music exposes you to like everyday speech, slang, idioms, stuff you wouldn't find in a textbook. It's a cool way to get a feel for how people really talk.
Okay, so music is powerful. Any practical tips for using it to get better at English?
Just start singing along to your favorite English songs. Find the lyrics online or use an app like Lyrics Training, which turns songs into games where you fill in missing words or match lyrics to what you hear.
I like that. Makes it fun, like a game. Any other strategies we can use with music?
Of course. Pay attention to the lyrics, write down new words or phrases, maybe try karaoke to focus on your pronunciation. If you're feeling ambitious, try writing down all the words from a part of a song, to really test if you understand what you're hearing.
Wow, that's next level. Okay, so we've covered podcasts, videos, music. That's a lot of listening. How do we make this a regular thing, not just something we do once?
You got it. Consistency is key. The trick is to make it part of your daily routine, even just for a few minutes every day. Little bits of listening consistently are way more effective than like doing it a ton just once in a while.
So instead of scrolling through like social media on my commute, I could listen to a podcast.
Hmm.
Or while I'm making dinner, I could have some English music on.
Exactly. Find those little moments in your day where you can fit it in. Don't be afraid to mix it up either. Try different types of podcasts, different kinds of music, different accents. The more you mix it up, the better your skills will be.
This has been awesome. I'm already thinking about how to fit more listening into my own learning.
That's great. It's all about finding what works for you and what keeps you interested. Remember, the goal is to enjoy it. When you're having fun, learning comes naturally.
Okay, so how about setting some goals for listening practice? The article mentions starting small and then gradually increasing the time, right? What does that look like in real life?
Basically, find a pace that works for you. Maybe start with one podcast episode or one song a day. As you get comfortable, listen for longer or more often.
Yeah, that makes sense. Like any other skill. You wouldn't try to run a marathon on your first day of training, right?
Exactly. And it's helpful to be specific with your goals, too. Instead of just saying, I want to get better at listening, try something like, I'm going to learn 5 new words from podcasts this week, or I'll practice shadowing for 10 minutes every day.
I love that. Those are specific, measurable, and totally doable. And it feels good to check them off as you make progress. Speaking of progress, how do we even know if we're getting better at listening? Are there, like, signs to look out for?
Absolutely. One of the most obvious is understanding more. Are you able to follow conversations and get what you're listening to without rewinding or looking up words all the time?
That makes sense.
And what about those subtle things in language, like humor, sarcasm, or emotion? Are you picking up on those more easily?
Good point.
Those are great signs you're improving. Another sign is if you speak English more fluently yourself, the more you hear native speakers, the more you'll naturally start to sound like them. You might even find yourself using new words or phrases that you picked up from listening.
So it's like a positive cycle. The more you listen, the better you get. And the better you get, the more confident you feel, and the more you keep listening and practicing.
Precisely. It's all about enjoying the process and celebrating those little wins along the way.
This has been so insightful. I'm definitely feeling motivated to make listening a bigger part of my language learning journey.
Awesome. And remember, we're just scratching the surface here. There's so much more to discover about listening and how it can, like, supercharge your English skills.
Speaking of discovering more, We have a very special guest joining us for the next part of our deep dive.
Yeah. They're a renowned language expert who's like spent their whole career researching how listening affects the brain and how we learn languages.
So stick with us. You won't want to miss this.
Back again, and we're going to dig even deeper into this whole listening thing. It's not just about like letting the sounds wash over you. There's like a whole brain process going on. It can totally change how you understand and speak English.
That brain process thing really caught my attention. Can you, break that down a bit more for us?
Sure. Think about how you learn anything new. It's about making connections in your brain, right? With language, listening gives your brain the material it needs to make those connections.
Okay.
Every conversation, every song, every podcast, it's like a workout for the part of your brain that deals with language.
So it's not just about getting the words. It's about how our brain, rewires itself to process the whole language.
Exactly. And the more you listen, the stronger those connections get. You process things faster, you understand better, and you sound more natural when you speak.
Wow, that's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
It makes just having English audio on in the background seem like kind of a waste.
Yeah.
You really have to be tuned in to get those benefits.
Totally. Active listening is so important. You got to be present, Notice how things are pronounced, how the speaker uses their voice to show emotion or emphasis.
So it's like we're training our ears to pick up on those subtle things in the language,
Yeah.
the things that go beyond just the words themselves.
Right. It's about developing a feel for the language.
Yeah.
Knowing what sounds right, what sounds off. And that comes from listening consistently and mindfully.
Okay, I'm totally on board with active listening. Are there specific techniques we can use to make it even better?
For sure. The article mentions a few that are really effective. One we touched on is repetition. Don't just let those words or phrases you don't get, fly by.
Yeah.
Rewind. Listen again. Maybe even say it out loud a few times.
Right.
It's like doing reps at the gym, but for language.
I've definitely noticed that helps me with those tricky pronunciations. What about note-taking? Is that still a good idea, even with all the digital stuff we have now?
Oh, totally. Note-taking is super valuable. When you write things down, it uses different parts of your brain, so you remember things better. And your notes become like a personal study guide just for you.
I like that. Making your own study guide. So much cooler than a textbook. The article also talks about shadowing, which sounds kind of like, I don't know, acting or something. What's that all about and why is it so good?
So shadowing is basically copying the speaker. You listen closely and try to say exactly what they say at the same time, matching their speed, pronunciation, even their tone. It's like you're stepping into their shoes vocally.
Wow. I can see how that would be a challenge, but also really cool for getting fluent and sounding more natural.
For sure. It makes you pay attention to little details and how things are said that you might not notice otherwise. It's like a workout for your voice and your brain at the same time.
This is all making so much sense. It's not just about hearing. It's about really engaging with the material and challenging yourself.
Right on.
Any other power techniques we should be using?
The article says, don't be afraid to slow down the audio if you need to.
Oh, yeah.
There's no shame in adjusting the speed to match what you can understand. It's way better to understand everything clearly than to rush through it and miss stuff.
That's so true. I've definitely been guilty of trying to keep up with podcasts at normal speed, even when I'm totally lost. Slowing it down lets you really focus on how words are pronounced, the vocabulary, the whole flow of the language.
Exactly. And then, as you get better, you can slowly increase the speed until you're comfortable at normal speed. It's like lifting weights. You start with what you can handle and then gradually add more.
I like that. It also makes me think about choosing material that's the right level for us. It's tempting to jump into those super advanced podcasts or really fast music, but we got to set ourselves up for success.
Totally. You got to find that sweet spot between being challenged and enjoying it. If it's too hard, you'll get frustrated. If it's too easy, you won't learn anything new. It's about finding that Goldilocks zone.
Love that analogy. Okay, so finding cool content that's the right level is important. But how do we make this a regular thing? Life gets busy. It's easy to forget.
You're telling me consistency is key, right?
Right.
A little planning goes a long way. The article suggests, making listening a part of your routine. Think about those times in your day when you're not really using your brain power, like commuting, working out, doing chores. Turn those into language learning time.
I can totally see that working. Instead of just scrolling on my phone on the bus, I could be listening to a podcast or some music. It's about being intentional with our time,
Exactly. And mix it up. Try listening while you cook, clean, whatever. You might be surprised how much you pick up without even realizing it.
I like that. It's about making language learning a natural part of your day, not just something you do separately. But let's be real. Sometimes, even with the best intentions, we fall off track. How do we stay motivated?
Good question. Setting realistic goals can be a game changer. Instead of just saying, like, I want to get better at listening, try something specific and measurable, something you can track.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah,
Having a clear target makes it feel less overwhelming.
totally. So instead of, I want to improve my listening, try, I'm going to listen to one podcast every day this week, or I'm going to spend 15 minutes shadowing 3 times this week.
Love those examples. They're specific, you can measure them, and they're actually doable. And it feels good to, like, check them off as you go.
Right.
Okay, but how do we know if it's actually working? Are there, like, signs that our listening skills are getting better?
Absolutely. There are a few things to look out for. One of the most obvious is understanding more. Are you finding it easier to follow conversations and understand what you're listening to without having to rewind or look up words all the time?
Yeah, I've definitely noticed that myself. The more I listen, the easier it gets to keep up.
Exactly. It means your brain is getting better at processing the language. Another good sign is if your own English sounds more fluent, the more you hear native speakers, the more you'll naturally start to sound like them.
So it's like your brain is picking up those patterns and using them without you even thinking about it.
Exactly. And you might even find yourself using new words or phrases that you picked up from listening. It means those words are moving from like your passive vocabulary to your active vocabulary.
That's awesome. Like all that listening is starting to pay off.
Right.
Any other signs we should be on the lookout for?
Don't forget about confidence. As your listening skills get better, you'll probably feel more confident about understanding and speaking English.
Oh, yeah.
That confidence can make you more willing to actually talk to people, which then makes you even more fluent. It's a great cycle.
This is so inspiring. It's amazing how something as simple as listening can have such a big impact on our language skills and like how confident we feel.
For sure. And it reminds us that learning a language is a journey, not just a destination. It's about enjoying the process, celebrating the little wins, and always challenging ourselves to grow.
Speaking of embracing the journey, we're about to take this exploration of listening to a whole other level.
Oh, yeah, we've got a very special guest for the next part of our deep dive, someone who's going to blow your mind.
I'm excited.
This guest is a top researcher in language learning, and they've spent their whole career understanding how listening affects our brains and how we learn. They're going to share some really cutting-edge stuff that'll change how you think about learning languages.
Awesome. So don't go anywhere. You don't want to miss this.
Welcome back, everyone. I'm so excited for this part. We've got a very special guest, someone who's like a real trailblazer in understanding how our brains learn language through listening.
Yeah, welcome to the show. Your research on like the brain benefits of listening for language learning is super interesting.
We can't wait to hear what you have to say.
Yeah, how can this change how we like approach learning English? To start us off, could you tell us what got you interested in this whole listening thing? What made you focus on, the power of listening for fluency?
Well, it actually started with my own struggles learning languages. I was never good at those traditional methods, like memorizing grammar and vocab lists. It felt
Yeah.
so forced, so unnatural. But when I started, really immersing myself in the sounds of a language through music, movies, conversations, things just clicked.
Yeah,
I started picking up patterns and, subtle things that I never could before.
I totally get that. It's like those moments when you suddenly understand a grammar rule, not from a textbook, but because you heard it in real life.
Exactly. That's what made me so curious about what was happening in the brain. I wanted to understand why listening felt so much more effective and, enjoyable.
And your research has really shown us so much about those processes,
Yes.
right? You've proven that listening isn't just passive, it's like a workout for the brain.
Absolutely. When you're really listening, you're not just decoding words, you're picking up on all these subtle cues, intonation, stress, rhythm.
Wow.
You're basically mapping out the sounds of the language without even realizing it, creating this framework for how to understand and speak.
So we're like tuning our brains to the music of the language, developing an ear for what sounds natural and what sounds off.
That's a great way to put it. And that musicality is essential for fluency. It's what lets you speak with natural rhythm, to get humor and sarcasm, to really
Yeah.
connect with native speakers. It goes beyond just the words. You start to feel the language.
That makes perfect sense. It's like learning to dance to the language, not just recite the steps. And that's where I guess having different kinds of listening material comes in, right? Podcasts, music, audiobooks, they each bring something unique to the table.
For sure. Podcasts are amazing for hearing about lots of different topics from different people. It's a great way to stay updated, learn new things, hear different opinions on stuff.
And because podcasts often have interviews or casual chats,
Mm.
you get to hear real natural language, right?
Yeah.
You pick up on those everyday expressions, the idioms, the flow of a real conversation, stuff that textbooks just don't capture.
It's like seeing how language really works in the wild. What about music? I'm a big believer in using music to make language learning fun, but what are your thoughts on, like, the brain benefits?
Oh, music is incredibly powerful. It taps into our emotions and our sense of rhythm. It bypasses all that conscious thinking and connects with us on a deeper level. When you
Yeah.
sing along, you're not just memorizing words, you're internalizing the sounds and rhythms, and that has a huge impact on how you pronounce things and how fluently you speak.
I've definitely noticed that myself. If a phrase is in a catchy song, I'm way more likely to remember it.
Yeah.
It's like music unlocks a different part of our brain, making language stick better.
It's amazing how music can make learning feel effortless.
Exactly. That's what makes it such a powerful tool. When you're enjoying yourself, you learn without even realizing it.
Now, we can't forget audiobooks. They seem like a great way to get immersed in stories and improve listening comprehension.
Oh, absolutely. Audiobooks are fantastic for that. You can listen to different genres, different authors, learn new vocabulary, all while enjoying a good story. And you can adjust the speed, so if it's too fast, you can slow it down, then gradually challenge yourself as you improve.
That's so important. It's all about finding that balance between challenge and not getting overwhelmed.
That Goldilocks zone, right?
Yes.
Okay, we've covered a lot, the science, the benefits, the active listening techniques. But for our listeners who want to put this into action, what are some steps they can take to make listening a regular part of their learning?
Start with setting realistic goals. Don't try to do too much at once. Begin with a little bit of listening each day, maybe 15, 20 minutes. Then as you get used to it, you can listen for longer or more often.
Great advice. Don't burn yourself out. It's about building a habit.
And how about those active listening techniques like shadowing, repeating, and taking notes? How can we use those effectively?
Those techniques are fantastic for taking things to the next level. Shadowing, for instance, is awesome for pronunciation and fluency. You listen and try to repeat exactly what the speaker is saying, matching their pace, their intonation, everything.
Like becoming a vocal chameleon.
Exactly. It might feel a little weird at first, but keep practicing. You'll start to notice little details you didn't before, and you'll sound more natural when you speak.
Repetition is also super helpful, especially for those words and phrases that are tricky. Don't be afraid to rewind and listen again and again or say it out loud a few times. It's like, you know, strengthening those connections in your brain.
It's about making those words and phrases a part of you, not just something you recognize.
Exactly. And taking notes can really reinforce what you're learning. Write down new words, interesting phrases, key points, anything that stands out. You can even make flashcards or use an app to review them later.
I love that. Creating your own personalized language resource from what you listen to makes it so much more engaging.
Absolutely. It's all about taking charge of your learning and finding what works for you.
As we wrap up this amazing conversation, what's the one thing you want our listeners to remember about the power of listening?
Enjoy it. Don't think of it as a chore, but as a chance to experience the beauty of the English language. Let the sounds, the rhythms, the stories, all of it wash over you, and you'll be amazed at how much you learn and grow.
That's beautiful. It's about changing how we see language learning. It's not a finish line, it's a journey.
Yeah, it's about opening ourselves up to the music of the language
Mhm.
and letting it become part of us.
Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and passion with us today. This has been such an eye-opening conversation.
You're very welcome. It's been a pleasure.
And to all our amazing listeners, we hope this deep dive has inspired you to use the power of listening in your own language learning. Remember, it's not just about hearing the words, it's about opening your ears to a world of possibilities.
So get out there, explore all the amazing audio content out there, and let the sounds of English guide you to fluency.
Until next time, happy listening.